Happy Rose Bowl Eve. And
how long were you
Happy
holding
New
those?
Year's Eve. Don't worry about that.
6 days.
It's the podcast daily. It is not a Friday, not a Freaky Friday, but it is the day before Ohio State and Oregon.
We're on Buckeye time.
Buckeye time. That makes this a Friday. Bold predictions style. That's Bill Landis, Jeremy Birmingham. I'm Austin Ward. We are at the Sheraton Grand in downtown Los Angeles. We're one day away from the granddaddy of them all. Everyone's favorite, best run bowl game in existence. And it's time to dig in to who's going to win, Ohio State and Oregon. People like it when we start with the prediction. We'll save Bill because I think there's just some growing intrigue. Berm, what do you think?
I don't know what I think yet.
That's kind of the problem. I have no idea what I think. This
will be a great show.
This is clearly a game that either team can win. It's clearly a game that either team can lose. But Oregon hasn't lost this season. Ohio State has a couple scars, as Ryan Day would call them. And as we get closer to the game, I think those scars are valuable for Ohio State.
They do remind us that the past is real.
That's what I've said that before. And
it's so beautiful.
I know America loves when we do Papa Roach lyrics on the show. And I think that in this instance, we're going to cut ourselves open.
Is there another Papa Roach song that you could quote?
I don't know. It's the only one that matters. Scars is one of the most beautiful songs ever written. I think Ohio State's going to win the game. And I think it's going to be like 37-34, somewhere in that ballpark. I think this comes down to one score on either side. I think it could be a who has the ball last situation. And so let me just make my first bold prediction. And that's that Jaden Fielding is going to hit a field goal to win this game for Ohio State in the same vein that happened the last time Ohio State was in the Rose Bowl when the Buckeyes needed a last-second field goal to win the game. And I think it's going to happen again.
Well, that's a 2-for-1. I think Ohio State is going to win this game. I think when you look back to the first meeting, I just keep going back and thinking every day, I'm like, well, there's another weird thing that really happened to Ohio State that didn't happen again or was pretty fluky. We've gone over them a lot, from the onside kick to, a fumble is not necessarily a thing that, was unusual, but I think the pass interference call at the end, the clock management, injuries that happened in the first half to Josh Simmons, Will Kazmarek, all the things that mounted in that game, virtually all of them went against Ohio State. At the same time, they did not play anywhere close to their best on defense. And in fact, it was their worst defensive performance of the year. So if there's marginal improvements that are made, if not every call or bounce of the ball works against the Buckeyes, I have a difficult time thinking that they're not going to emerge on Wednesday night victorious, move on to the semifinals, and I think it'll be somewhere around the lines of like 31-23.
I don't know who's going to win. I was trying to decide as you guys were talking.
I know America wants you to say that Oregon's going to win because how mad they could be about UC Tennessee.
I was very wrong about that game. That was all vibes. That was all like, I have no idea what to expect from Ohio State. And they seemed like in a pretty bad place, and they clearly weren't, and I was wrong about that. This is not vibes. This is ball. This is two very good teams that I think match up well, that played a 1-point game, obviously, the last time they were on the field together. My lean has been Ohio State. Partly because I just think it's hard to beat a team that's as good as Ohio State twice in the same season, and it doesn't have to be more complicated than that. So I'll pick Ohio State 42-41. I think it'll be another 1-point game. I think it'll be a high-scoring game. I've been trying to think about some things about Oregon. It's kind of like the down the stretch of the season, wondering if they're applicable to this game. I don't know that they are. We've talked about Oregon getting run on a little bit by Penn State. Penn State's got a really big offensive line
and a healthy one.
Like I don't know that I feel Ohio State's offensive line played great against Tennessee, and they ran well after being set up by the pass to do so. So that could definitely happen in this game too. But Ohio State threw it with a lot of success on Oregon the last time they played. I think they'll do that again. It's going to come down probably to which quarterback might make a mistake or two. And Dylan Gabriel didn't really make any the first time Ohio State played, but he has made some throughout the year. So maybe he's due to do it against Ohio State, and that could swing the difference. It is really going to be, I think, who steals the possession, whether it's a turnover, whether it's a special teams play like we saw in the first game. And it's ultimately, I think, going to be about the offensive firepower of both teams, and both of them are very good, but I'll take Ohio State's by a point.
We had a chance to speak to Ryan Day on the Notebook on Monday, and he said pretty plainly, they tried to watch the pass game to come up with like what's applicable and what's not. And did you get the impression that I got? Like it seemed to me like he was saying a lot of the stuff was not even really relevant to this game.
I think it's a fine line because you have to look at what happened in the first matchup. Like, but the personnel has changed slightly for both teams, most notably on Ohio State's offensive line, and with Oregon getting Jordan Birch back, like that's where a lot of the headlines will go. But even if you took some of the games down the stretch when Will Kazmarek was not available for Ohio State, he had a chance to really make an impact in the first meeting, and that was taken away after the first drive. So I think that there's elements of both things that are true. You can, and I think need to take from what happened on October 12th, because you know generally what the schematics are going to be. You have a very good idea what the personnel is going to be, even if it is not exactly the same. But then there are the adjustments, not just that what Ohio State made in the second half of the year, primarily on defense, but that Oregon, as the season went on, has had to adjust what they do as well. So they're not exactly the same, but you can't also ignore what happened the first time around. So I think that's one of the more fascinating dynamics now of this playoff era and of the chance to have rematches and play somebody 2 or 3 times. It's been going on for, dozens and dozens of years in the NFL. It's very common for them to do that, but it's a new wrinkle to college football.
If we could, since this is not a traditional Freaky Friday bold predictions, it's a Twisted Tuesday or whatever we want to call it. What is your single biggest individual, whether position battle or player battle, that is the dictator of this game?
Oregon's receivers against Ohio State's defensive backs. If Oregon can be as explosive down the field as it was in the first game, then I think they're going to be really hard to beat. That's not really what they've been all year. They've not attacked down the field.
For them
if you look at like air yards, yards per attempt, whatever, like Dylan Gabriel's a lot of dink and dunk, and those guys will run after the catch, which makes Oregon dangerous. But that was just like throwing it over the heads. So if Denzel Burke and Davis Nigbenosin, Jordan Hancock, Dre Matthews, who didn't play in that first game, all those guys collectively, if they can limit those kind of down the field explosives, then I think that's something that swings the game greatly in Ohio State's favor.
I think the answer is always going to come down to Ohio State's offensive line and defensive line, like in the trenches. But for the sake of conversation, the same part is true for Oregon's secondary. Like physically, they're great athletes, but they are overmatched in terms of size and strength.
Yeah.
And getting Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Ibuka and Carnell Tate in those situations, if the protection holds up, if the scheme, if Chip Kelly and Ryan Day design stuff that is similar to what they did against Tennessee or the first time around against Oregon, I think that the Ducks are going to have problems. They are reliant on the pressure getting home. But I still look like every game that comes out, Will Howard's numbers, if you choose to blitz him, are just off the charts, some of the best in the country. He makes good decisions, and he's accurate with the football, and he has guys Jeremiah Smith, there is no comp for that. There's no corner that's going to win a matchup against him at the college level. And I guess we'll find out when he gets to the NFL. I think he's going to win most of those matchups inevitably at some point as well. But, what Emeka brings, what Carnell brings, like, these are undersized corners. And if you just turn them loose, I think Oregon's going to have a difficult time trying to corral them.
To me, it's Carson Hinsman and whatever guard he's lined up with versus Derek Harmon.
Yep.
I really, if you watch the Ohio State offense this year, even at times when they were disjointed and struggling, as they have for pretty much most of the second half of the season, that Michigan game is in my head about what Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham did to Ohio State. We've seen Ohio State play really good defensive ends multiple times this year and not really have a problem with them. Even Mateo Uiagalelei and Jordan Birch have like 20 sacks combined. Like, that's a lot. I don't think that's a problem for Ohio State. It's the middle of the line. So it's Carson Hinsman at the point of attack against Derek Harmon, and then whichever side he's going to, who's the guy helping Carson Hinsman there, whether it's Austin Saraville, Luke Montgomery, or Tiger Shabola. Like, if Derek Harmon is in the backfield regularly in this game, Ohio State cannot win.
I agree.
So, like, to me, that's the matchup that changes the game.
All right, you got a bold prediction?
I do. I really like what's happened with like the safeties for Ohio State, and I've been asking a lot about that. The reconfiguration of it, Jordan Hancock's playing deep more, which allows Caleb Downs to really roam and just being more involved on a play-to-play basis. I can't recall what Caleb did in that first game, actually, but I think he's going to have a dozen tackles.
He was definitely the best.
Yeah, he's going to have a dozen tackles in this game. Did they give away a Rose Bowl Defensive Player of the Game? Right, he's going to win it.
I remember Brendan White winning it in 20.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So I think he'll have a dozen tackles, and I also think last year's Rose Bowl was it the first play. J.J. McCarthy is rolling out, and he just threw an abysmal pass that Caleb Downs intercepted, but couldn't get his foot down. Mm-hmm. He'll atone for that. I'll have an interception in this game. I think that the stolen possession that I think might flip this game will come via a Caleb Downs interception.
I like that. It's a very good bold P. Drilling down.
Yeah.
Will that be on the first drive for Dylan Gabriel, or no?
No, it'll have to be later in the game, I think, to be as impactful as I'm envisioning it being.
Okay. Here's what I think is going to happen. We've spent 2 months dissecting and talking about the lack of pressure and the way that Jim Knowles was trying to address it, the way that Larry Johnson has maximized the talent of those guys up front. And we just saw JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer deliver their best simultaneous performances of the year. I think this is going to be, of their careers, in fact, I think this will be even more productive. I think we've spent some time talking about the motivation level of this team, and it's a playoff. Maybe that's a silly thing to talk about. The revenge, that probably doesn't maybe matter as much, but the parts of that game that no one could deny, that changed the re-engineering of the rushmen and everything else, is that they did not meet the moment in that game. And it's difficult for me to imagine a scenario where Jack and JT don't duplicate the performance against Tennessee and erase any of the conversation about what happened in October. So I think that they are going to combine for 9 pressures and 4 sacks in this game. And we'll just forget that the first matchup ever happened.
You have to forget the first matchup ever happened. You can't.
I can't. I mean,
you can't play it again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
you get second chances.
You do get second. Not many times. I've heard a few times this week.
No.
They're blessings.
When we've had snap judgments in the last few weeks, we've often done what's the most interesting thing you heard this week or from this press conference moment. I keep getting Jeremiah Smith on a loop in my head saying he wants more, and he wanted more. He wanted more put on him. Yeah. I think this is the game where we see him potentially go from a freak alien to a legend in college football.
As a freshman.
The Rose Bowl is where Emeka Egbuka introduced himself to the country. It's where Marvin Harrison introduced himself to the country.
Jackson Smith and Jigba
introduced himself to the country. I think that there's a moment here for Jeremiah Smith to put this game on his shoulders. And if Ohio State's going to win it, he has to have his biggest game of the year. And I think he will. I think the Buckeyes, they targeted him 13 times against Oregon in the first matchup. He had, 9 catches? Mm-hmm. So let's add 4 to each of those numbers. Give me 13 catches for 165 yards and 3 touchdowns for Jeremiah.
Okay. Like that.
I just don't think as good as Jabbar Muhammad can be and as good as the rest of the Oregon secondary is as far as their ability to cover people. Covering him is one very small part of the equation that no one's been able to do all year, including Oregon. Mm-hmm. But then actually stopping him from catching the ball is another. And I just think that this is a game where Will Howard, you're going to have the pristine conditions to throw the ball. I think that Ohio State is going to lean heavily on Will Howard's arm. And I think you'll see double-digit targets for both him and Emeka Egbuka like we did in the first game. But I just think this is a game where Jeremiah Smith, you have to let your best players win the game. And Jeremiah Smith is the best player in college football.
He sure is. Well, he's probably going to be someday. I don't know that he definitely is right now, but
he's in the conversation.
He has that upside.
He's the most talented player in college football.
You don't get no argument here. Second bold P.
Second.
No punts. In
the entire game.
No punts in the whole game.
What? From either team.
I got a high-scoring game. I think both coaches are going to roll the dice on 4th down. I think you'll see some splash defensive plays. Yeah, no punts.
Wow.
Yeah, no. It's
Is that going to be okay for you?
Pedal down. I'm good with it. Yeah, it's pedal down the whole game for both teams. Making sure you finish drives with touchdowns. No punts.
Dan Lanning does push the envelope on 4th down decisions.
He does, and Ryan Day has. I think he's doing it more this year. We've talked a lot with him about the analytics company that I guess they've enlisted to help them with those decisions, like a lot of teams are doing. So, I think Day will match Lanning's aggressiveness in this game.
I'm on alert for even more usage for Travion Henderson based on the way that he played against Tennessee. Not really at the expense of carries or opportunities for Quinshon Judkins, but I think because of what I mentioned with Oregon's secondary, and if they have to devote bracket coverage or additional safety help, I think Ohio State is in a position, whether that's screens, whether that's some of the wheel route stuff we've seen, willingness to do some things, whatever it takes to win, right? I think Trey proved something again, which he's done throughout the course of this year. I think he's been great, maybe underappreciated. Maybe we don't talk about it enough. Maybe there just were games where they weren't using him in a way that really let him shine. I think using him as a receiving threat may become like a necessity in some respects based on the way Oregon wants to defend Ohio State. We'll see, but I think Trey is going to have 6 catches in this game, and I think they'll go for like 95 yards and a score. I think 150 all-purpose yards is within reach for him, and I think he might. It's hard to argue against the point that like Jeremiah Smith is going to be the focal point and that he could be the obvious Ohio State offensive MVP, or that Will Howard, if he has a big game. Again, that would go back to this conversation of Travion maybe being underappreciated for what he's given this year, but I think to open up some of the other opportunities, Trey is going to have to be part of that, both as a rushing threat and as a receiving threat. And I think he's ready for that moment more than capable.
Yeah, I was going to – my next BP was Travion Henderson having 100 yards receiving in this game.
Got a lot of receiving production in this game.
It's going to be a pass-happy day.
You need more points, I think.
No, because there's –
You're in the 30s?
Yeah, I mean, you get bogged down. Once you get into the red zone, it's harder to throw. Everyone knows that.
That is true. There's the 12th man.
Yeah, Cody Simon is going to have an interception.
Well, hold on now.
For Ohio State.
You already made 2 bold predictions.
No, I haven't.
Yes, you have.
Oh, I did. The kicker.
You're trying to.
Cody Simon's going to have an interception. Bill, tell us about it.
Okay.
You're trying to push Liberty later on in the show. She's got to give her bold prediction.
Oh, man. She's always right, though. It annoys me.
She's very good at it. Take it away.
That time again on Bold Predictions, and Liberty is back thanks to Future Fans Sports, futurefans.com/OSU. That's where you want to go. She's got on one of the new kids shirts, a little cursive, script Ohio. What do you think of that?
It says, I know cursive, but only a few letters. OHIO.
Oh, okay. Very good. And they've got that code going on right now through the Rose Bowl to get 10% off. Future Fans, get the full Future Fans football box right here. What's that code, Lib?
Buckeye!
And I can tell how well this has been working because I was getting all those texts during the game about how much fun you were having, how engaged you were in the playoff game, the win over Tennessee. How fun was that?
Good, pretty good. And we get a rematch.
That's right. Ohio State and Oregon, a rematch of that regular season matchup. Thrilling game out there in Eugene in October. Buckeyes came up short in that one. Who's going to win on Wednesday night?
I think you know the answer to that. OHIO.
Okay, well, what's your bold prediction for how that's going to happen?
I think Mecca, Buka, Will Howard, and
You didn't tell me beforehand, so I don't know what you're going to say. But I guess maybe Jeremiah Smith, because you were pretty excited about his test.
Yeah.
What about him?
They're all going to score 2 touchdowns.
2 touchdowns? Well, that's a lot of points for Ohio State. They'll definitely win the Rose Bowl like that.
Well, maybe Will Howard will have a running touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
And Emeka will have 1 touchdown. And then after all I've seen out of Jeremiah Smith, I think he can make 2 out of that group.
Okay. Well, that would be pretty exciting to see. Wednesday, looking forward to that. Another playoff game. And as you said, a rematch with the Ducks is going to be pretty exciting. Futurefans.com/OSU. They've been bringing Liberty's bold predictions to you all year. They've got that code 10% off. I think it's going to be active as long as Ohio State stays alive in the college football playoff. What's the code, though?
Buckeye.
That's it. Futurefans.com/OSU. Back to bold predictions.
All right, we're back. Thanks to Liberty.
So Cody Simon's going to have an interception. No? Okay.
You got it? Yeah.
That's
No,
it.
I mean,
That's your
do it.
third bowl P.
I see one huge defensive play in this game. And
That's the way Caleb Downs.
you think it's Caleb Downs. I agree it could be. but I think it will be Cody Simon, and I think he's going to return it
As
for a
if there was a way
touchdown.
to argue.
I think he's going to return it for a touchdown, and that's like the backbreaker. So that's the touchdown that's going to put Ohio State up like 34.
You got 1 million receiving yards and a defensive touchdown.
Yeah,
you need more points.
It's going to put Ohio State up like 34-24. It's going to put Ohio State up like 34-24, and then Oregon's going to tie it, and then Ohio State's going to have to win 37-34 on the last second field goal.
Okay.
Was that the score he gave?
I don't know.
Yeah, I said 37-34.
It was in the 30s.
I guess
That's exactly what I said.
It was so long.
I don't know why.
I don't think that was the number.
I don't think it was the numbers.
Go back to the start of the tape, everyone. I said 37-34, and I want America to understand
slowly
how
realizing it's gotta have
disrespectful these people are to me, that they're not even listening to what I said. That happened 16 minutes ago, and they're not even remembering.
I knew you said they were winning by a field goal and that it was in the 30s, but I don't. Those numbers don't match up.
37-34 doesn't
Okay.
match it. That's 3 points.
All right, fine. I don't. Maybe you didn't say the number.
Maybe that's what it was.
Again, America,
We'll
I
check
want
the
you to
tape.
know,
The unfortunate
We'll
part
check
is that
the
the
tape.
tape exists, and
Yeah.
we're having a
we're going to have to go
pointless
back.
argument about it
That's
right
right. That's
now. Okay. You have a third bowl prediction.
I do. I've gone to this well a few times. I don't think I've ever been right about it. But the one thing that did jump out to me when I was rewatching the Big Ten championship game and trying to figure out why Penn State ran the ball so well, they involved Drew Aller a lot. There was a lot of quarterback read in that game. It wasn't always a keep. In fact, very rarely was it a keep for Drew Aller, but he was the guy who I think unlocked some stuff because it was just the threat of him running. And I think Will Howard presents a much greater threat were he to pull the ball against Oregon. Will ran it a decent amount, if I recall correctly, in that first game. I know he scored the rushing touchdown early in that game. I think he will have 3 rushing touchdowns in this game.
Wow.
What?
It's like red zone execution. I think one of them actually could be a long one. Maybe I'll say that. I'll say one of them will be a long. We have not really seen him get loose for anything more than what's his season long rush,
just the training camp.
just the training camp one. I don't think.
What could have taken at Penn State.
Yeah.
How long are we talking?
I will say one of his rushing touchdowns will be 20 plus yards, and then the other 2 will come inside the 5-yard line. Because Ohio State all year, most of the year, has been excellent at finishing drives with touchdowns. Arguably the best team in the country, minus I guess one game.
What game was that, Bill?
You know what happened. So I think they'll get back to that. I actually think that's a big difference in this game because Oregon has not always been great in the red zone. Dylan Gabriel's thrown quite a few red zone interceptions this year. Maybe that's another a spot where the game can get turned in Ohio State's favor. But I will continue to predict Will Howard's legs being a factor, I guess, until I run out of opportunities to do so. So that's
It didn't
my third
really
goal.
have to happen against Tennessee.
It
right?
didn't,
The way that
no.
they dominated the game.
Yeah.
You could tell that it was in.
Yes.
There was a design play.
Yeah.
They had opportunities to do it, but it was like, well, you don't have to tap into it right now because they were
Correct.
manhandling Tennessee.
Yeah. I think they'll need a little bit of it because I don't. Maybe they will just score from 30 yards out like they did against Tennessee. I think they might have to earn it a little more in this game, and then when you get closer to the end zone, then you need to run your quarterback.
Okay, that's good. It's an ACC officiating crew, correct?
The worst.
But that could work to Ohio State's advantage because according to Big Ten bylaws, it is legal to hold Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking back, I believe the pass rush is going to be dominant. I believe there's also going to be different blitz looks, communication, streamline. It's not going to be all on Jack and JT to provide it. And a fresh set of eyes from outside the Big Ten, Big Ten silo, where apparently, again, you're just allowed to hold and do whatever you want to any Ohio State defender. I don't think that those rules apply.
The ACC is who called the Ohio State-Tennessee game.
I know, but they didn't need to worry about it.
So now they've seen it. Now they can know what
Got
to
it on
expect.
tape. They can prepare. And so in the Rose Bowl, with an ACC crew, that I think they're going to do a fantastic job. But they're going to call one hold on Oregon. And Ohio State will.
Would that be the first? Is it true that the opponents have been called for a hold against Ohio State this year? Is that the thing people have been popping around?
One, and it was declined, I think.
Okay.
So
it's going to happen. Now, I think Oregon may hold.
that's
more than
Tony
once.
Gerben from Buckeye Huddle did the research on that, right? So it's been 50 games since an offensive lineman was called for a hold against Jack Sawyer. That
feels like all the games.
And
that
you
Jack is
have, I think, 500 photos of Jack Sawyer where he's being held.
Ohio State is dead last in the country when it comes to penalties or opponent penalties against them. Like, something has to give eventually.
I think it's on. Like, I get it.
But it's also Ohio State's issue for not making it an issue.
Well, it's and I think it's also human nature. Like I'm saying this a little bit tongue in cheek, but when they're watching, if you're playing Purdue or Northwestern, and the Big Ten officials know Ohio State has the advantage, they see this, like, oh well, they should be able to make this play no matter what. Like I think that's human nature that they're not going to call it and make a bigger deal of it. This is a playoff game. If you see a blatant hold and you don't call it, and you're at the highest level of your officiating profession, you would be embarrassed by that.
And to be fair, I think four of the lowest 6 teams in the country of opponents' penalties against are in the Big Ten, including Michigan and Penn State.
It's like Big Ten basketball.
So they just don't call anything in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
So it maybe just feels a little bit crazy when you look at the numbers compared to some of these other schools. But it's a league-wide issue. So maybe you're right. Maybe having an ACC crew will spur them to action. It didn't last week.
I think it's going to happen, and I think if you look across all 4 games, I would boldly predict that you're going to see an uptick in penalties called for all of them. Holding, pass interference, the stakes are higher, and the scrutiny and the attention is higher. It definitely shouldn't work that way, that you are paying more attention or you're more worried about if people are going to post clips of this play or that play if you're an official, but you don't want to be having your address posted on after a game for missing a call that is obvious.
Well, maybe the official should have to talk to the media after the game.
Well, again, but that's my point. There's more, I think, more accountability once you get to these playoffs, because the crews are chosen. They're supposed to be the best one. They know the stakes, and they know that there's going to be frame-by-frame analysis of it in a way that doesn't exist for the other games. And they know that,
especially in the ACC,
if you're just going to go, well, if this doesn't,
ain't nobody watching that ball.
If this doesn't get called for a hold for Ohio State Northwestern, nobody's going to really worry about it. I can keep my flag in the pocket. I don't think that they approach the officials are going to approach the playoff games the same way that the coaches and the players are, which I think is why you'll see more penalties, because they've been happening. They just haven't been called.
So your bold P is what again?
A holding call.
A holding call.
One holding call.
I also think that there will be an uptick in penalties thrown across all 4 quarterfinals.
Okay.
Which I don't know.
Sounds super exciting.
Holding.
Ending bold predictions on a Twisted Tuesday on a high note. But I think it's worth
You saw it here first, folks. If there's a hold penalty, all credit to Austin.
No cheering in the press box.
I'm going to throw more roses in the air if they finally call it. That's what's going to happen, I promise you. So bold predictions in the book. There's another press conference with Ryan Day and Dan Lanning on Tuesday. So we'll have...
What time is that?
I think it's
9:30.
So 12:30 Eastern time. It will be streaming on the podcast.
Streaming. Bill and Doug have, I think, like 17 shows on tap.
Yeah, we're doing a lot. We're gonna have we live 3 different times on KOTN,
and we'll also be live for Road Breaks at like 7:00 Eastern time on the podcast.
Happy New Year!
Rip open some sapphires, and before we start watching the Penn State game.
Yep. So keep an eye out for that. If you are on Subtext, you'll be able to send in some questions for us to answer notebook style for that. And then we'll get into Wednesday. It is finally here, 2025, and the Rose Bowl. Yes, Brian?
We're not going to have a podcast daily on Wednesday morning, just so people are aware.
It's a normal game day, so the shelf life of that episode would not last very long. We'll have pregame keys instead. We will be leaving for the stadium at 9 a.m. Pacific time. As soon as we get there, we'll crank out some pregame keys for you to get ready for that. So that's the schedule. That's what's coming. And thanks for joining us on the podcast daily for some bold predictions on a Tuesday. He's Bill Landis. That's Jeremy Birmingham. I'm Austin Ward. Happy New Year, folks. We'll see you again later.